what's up? Welcome to another part of The Friends That I Had Made, which is part 3 from Aspie with Attitude, episode 168. And my name is David, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, I have a speech impairment, as you'll hear from my last part of my life story, and I have a speaking syndrome, and that's why I call myself an Aspie. And now, before I actually get into this final part of this video called The Friends That I Had Made, part 3, have you ever seen episode 166, which is called Friends That I Had Made part 1, which actually takes you on the journey from my birth, and I'm skipping time to February 1987, and tell my story of all friends that I've had, the ones that came and gone from February 1987 up till November 1998. And also there was part 2 called Friends That I Had Made part 2, which was done for episode 167, continuing on the journey from October 1998, working my way to say June or October 2008. And this time round I'm actually going to start a story for this part from June 2008, working till the upload of episode 168, the one that you're watching now from Aspie with Attitude. And also, you can look in the description down below, since I'll be leaving a link to the entire playlist of a 3-part series that I had made for this YouTube channel called Aspie with Attitude. So anyway, it's just time to get on with it, because this is going to be a very long video. Anyway, just sitting in the hallway from Aspie with Attitude, episode 168, and Friends That I Had Made, part 3. And now, this is the final part of the series. We're still towards the end of 2008, and this reminds me, I'm going to turn on this year block so you can keep on track to know where I'm at with this video series, just like in the last 2 videos and last 2 uploads that I've done. So not only that, my phase being an Australian hip hop artist had stood strong at the time, I'm going to recommence this story from June 2008, when I had completed my apprenticeship as a furniture maker. Since that, my aim, my goal was to complete my apprenticeship and find another job, getting away from all this timber that I was allergic to. Well, since that, my father was happy to have finished my apprenticeship, and what my father actually wanted to do was to keep that job going no matter what was happening. And on top of it, my father wanted me to leave the hip hop scene behind and just join a woodworking club, while things were just going too good for me with the hip hop scene. And I had to refuse, since I was at the time had gained an opening spot with Australian hip hop's biggest name called Bliss and Esso up at Force Creek the second time, and it was heaps of snow that season as well too. The best window opportunity to play one of the biggest names in Australian hip hop. So in the end of 2008, not only did I begin my new job as a machine operator, I have made friends with these following Australian hip hop acts groups, which happens to be TRANQUIL Artillery, Green Tea, 3 to 2, Lost Theory, Form of Audio, Mind Over Matter, Illzilla, and Peasant 360, and Metro Must. And from the start of 2009, not only did I begin my new job as a machine operator, also started to become friends with more and more of other hip hop acts, which happen to be C-Wide Crew, Loose Cannons, HYPNOTIC's Crew, Primary Source, and Bash and Killjoy. It was throughout 2009 I had maintained my friendship also with Chance Waters and the other rapper Mantra, who was also a part of that other hip hop group called Illzilla. So like I was keen to perform my hip hop sets at least once a month in front of a decent crowd, and at the same time I was actually working on my second album called The Next Chapter, and I have kept those friends at each and every hip hop shows that I went to. And it was towards the end of 2009 when things went too good for me with the Australian hip hop scene. My father tried asking me to walk away from the hip hop scene. Well, after making all these friends, as on behalf of my argument, so like I couldn't do that unless if those listed friends did walk away from the hip hop scene too. My father did try telling me those were my fake friends and they were just acquaintances, and none of them were in a position of being my friends ever. As it happens, they weren't. Every hip hop acts, as I had mentioned, were very kind to me, and they weren't the toxic friends just like Chris, the one I had mentioned that I grew up with way back in the 90s decade when I went to high school and first started this friendship out in primary school in my last 2 video uploads. None of these people were nothing like that. Oh, I just didn't care, like I kept performing alongside those hip hop acts, and also I did hang out with these dudes outside the hip hop scene just like real friends. For example, at the start of 2010, I did go back to Sydney and I met up with Chance Waters. It wasn't a poker night and wasn't even a hip hop gig. I met him at a cafe, meeting up with one of his other friends that he called Johnny Utah. And so like I even got an invitation from the CY crew, which is another hip hop act. So like I was invited to join their snowboarding trip, and the reason why I didn't join their snowboarding trip was due to the fact that I did lose my job and I was just trying to save up a lot of money. Well, I still could have gone and hung out with dudes snowboarding. So anyway, like 2010 was very much the same as 2009. It wasn't until that was on the 16th of September 2010. I went out in the city on my work night without my father even knowing or anything like that. And I was performing a show alongside Bash and Killjoy, Lost Fury, Primary Source and Citywide crew. So like I did get home till midnight just to find that my father was actually cleaning the coffee table, and like I had my last conversation with my father because the next day on the 17th of September 2010, my father had died of a stroke and he passed away. I did receive my condolences from my friends on behalf of my father's death, and I still continued to intentionally move on forward with the Australian hip hop scene and stick with it just to get over the fact that my father did die. And it was 6 weeks later, I actually released my second album, The Next Chapter. And I had to put on a massive show involving Primary Source, HYPNOTIC's crew, Lost Fury, and Bash and Killjoy. And also I haven't mentioned Death Ron, which actually, he makes that list of actually being one of my close hip hop friends at the time too. In the start of 2011, as a new year had just begun, I began to become best friends with Bash and Killjoy. I invited them to my house for a barbecue and we were having a jam session. Just briefly to describe who Bash and Killjoy is, at the time it was a hip hop act that used live instruments and used live guitars. And what they did was like brought guitars over to my house. And we had a barbecue, we sat around the barbecue having a bit of a jam session. And also Jamie invited other people, which the other person was called Rhett. So anyway, this was my very first social engagement, a real one that I had at my house, since after my failed attempt with Nick back in 1998, and very undisputed as well. So like, this had been a real normal friendship that I was getting out of my friend Jamie from Bash and Killjoy. It was from March 2011. I had began filming my hip-hop music video titled The Sword. And it was my friends Jamie from Bash and Killjoy, and also I was friends with Gabriel, and there was a Ben, and also Rhett, who came to that barbecue, were the extras for my music video that I did at a place called Birdsland Reserve, which I'll be doing my walk with me anytime soon here. It was by the 26th of June 2011, what was supposed to be my father's 53rd birthday. This was a night that I had Chance Waters to become friends with Bash and Killjoy after I sort of helped out to bring the show together, since I was asking for acoustic guitared hip hop acts. That's what Chance Waters went to, so was Bash and Killjoy. And now I'm talking about my mate Jamie here. On that very night when he met Chance Waters, my friend Jamie from Bash and Killjoy had met this female called Bron. Since then, it was Jamie and Bron. Shortly after, me, Jamie and Bron, in the start of August 2011, started hanging out at hip hop shows, and we had met this potential toxic friend, and for this video, I'm going to call him JT. So JT will be the name of a new toxic friend, as I explained back in episode 77. It was towards the end of 2011 that it was Jamie and Bron and Rhett and each of one of their other friends, including that person named Gabriel. We all decided to hang out at the lakes, which is called Lissenfield Lake Park, just pretty much at the same reservoir where I did Walk With Me number 7, which is something I did for episode 147, just in the same park in a swimming spot. So we just basically, most of the summer, used to actually hang out at that swimming spot. Up till the start of 2012, Blair had left the hip hop group Bash and Killjoy, allowing Jamie to finally go solo, and still kept his drummer called Casey. So while the friendship with Jamie and Bron took off, we decided to regularly hang out with that toxic friend called JT. Like, towards us, he had a lot of charm, he was cool, he was awesome, very hip hop, and really keen to really rap and really roared it out. That was him back in 2012. Even in the start of 2012, I was speaking with my friend Ben, who was in my hip hop music video called The Sword, was also friends with my high school friends, which happens to be Nathan and Matt, each from high school. So through Ben, I had made contact with Nathan in London. So like I asked him after the 2012 Olympic Games in London was finished. And it did happen that in the end, I did fly to London and got to hang out with Nathan. I had visited England for over a week. So like, the aim of this trip was to be in London and just have a happy times in London, like going pub crawling around the streets of London with my friend Nathan. Since we just never had much to do with each other outside of school hours, even though back in my high school days, I used to always want to hang out all the time, which I never really did, and got stuck with this toxic friend named Chris at the time. So like, what a most ultimate way to hang out with a friend from high school. Oh, that was completely out of school hours. So anyway, being 32 years old, walking on the streets of London, I think that's actually more mature that I did this way. And that's the best thing I ever got to do with my friend Nathan from high school. And since I did stay for the hip hop scene in 2013, so like, things just continue as normal and everything like that. I continued hanging out with Jamie and Bron, and another summer came that me, Jamie, Bron and Rhett used to hang out at the lakes, going for a swim on a hot day. So anyway, so like, I can actually go to June 2013. So like what I did in June 2013, and I invited this person named JT to live at my house with my sister and her other friend for 6 weeks. Yeah, it all happened in June 2013. But as it happens, like it just turned out to be a real disaster that I got JT to live in this house. And it just turned out to be another toxic friend like I had described back in episode 77. And what this toxic friend did wrong was that he decided to refuse to help me to pay rent. He spat out on our front porch right in front of our front door. He was stealing food and he was stealing money, particularly from my sister and her other friend. And also plus there was all these old wines covered in dust. Anyway, I can tell you, he drank a whole lot and he's always very sick after drinking all these stale wine that's been collecting dust. The same wine from 1984, since he was a real raging alcoholic. And all this had went on for 6 weeks. JT had become the worst friend I ever made in my life. A lot worse than Chris back in my teenage years. The Chris that I mentioned back in episode 166. So it was in mid-2014. Jamie and Bron had invited JT to live at their house for 6 weeks. And the same thing did almost happen when JT had did the same thing. And it just turned out to be a real disaster when Jamie and Bron had JT staying at their house. And it was in the middle of 2014. Like, me, Jamie and Bron were into slam poetry nights, which wasn't a hip hop night. And it was just so embarrassing that time, like, it was on the same day when Rolf Harris was done for child sex offences. What JT did wrong at that slam poetry night, since that the poetry community was actually shaming Rolf Harris for his sentence and what he really did, it was JT who actually sung out loud, "Tie the kangaroo down." So anyway, like I've never ever seen JT since April 2015. So like I've just cut him off there since he just wasn't a very good person to be friends with. And while I still maintained my friendship with Mantra in 2014, I had become friends with another rapper called Dylan Joel. Well, in that time that I actually knew Dylan Joel, I was going to all his shows, and pretty much in the start of 2015, he did twice visit my house, Dylan Joel. So like this friendship was just very short-lived, since I almost began to spend less time in the hip-hop scene after a couple of visits from Dylan Joel. And it was from 2015, I only went out to hip-hop shows only when Jamie and Bron went out to one. So like, I was meant to have done a show with Dylan Joel in November 2015, so I didn't get to do it. And the last time when I did perform on stage is when my mate Jamie, still performed as Sebastian Killjoy, performed a show with a Perth MC called Mathis. And since that, Mathis actually had a bit to do with Dylan Joel as well. So like, that was just the last time I actually made it live on stage. And then by the time when 2016 came in, this is when my hip hop phase started to slowly drift away. And I was still keeping my friendship with Jamie and Bron, and I tried to making other friends back in 2016, and those other friends were just complete different interests from the hip hop scene. Like, since these people were into the occult and they were neo-pagans. And what I had a problem with these friends is they just felt too naive to be friends with these people. And by the start of 2017, I decided not to pursue my friendship with those neo-pagans. Instead, I stuck being friends with Jamie and Bron, and so I really decided to stick with them. So like, I was due to move out of home by the end of 2017. So like, I used to drink at this pub called Bell Tavern, and I regularly drank there after when my hip hop phase did drift away. And once again, there was this woman called Paula, and like I've met her way back in 2002 at Leon's 21st birthday, as I mentioned back in episode 167. So like, I've been talking a lot with Paula since 2009 onwards, and she even knew Jamie and Brian as well. And what was so special about Paula was that I did tell her about my pipe dream that I want to become a techno music producer. And also, plus, like, there was another person back from the early days when I worked at that other place that had that timber that was causing me eczema and asthma attacks. His name was Jay, and I used to work with him back from 2000 when I first started working here till he got fired back in 2002. And Jay was with another friend who actually served 20 years in jail for some serious crime. I finally moved out, since I've never seen Paula ever since then, and I've never returned to that pub called Bell Tavern since November 2017. I had moved into my new home in March 2018. It was on the 30th of April 2018 is when my older brother did die, and it was from 26th of May 2018 I had launched my YouTube channel called Aspie with Attitude. And then since I was looking for a social group where I can actually finally make new friends, be friends with people who are on the autism spectrum, since there was never an attempt to make friends with people who are autistic since 1987 with Jared. So like, I went to this social meeting on the 14th of August 2018, and I had attended to my very first Different Journeys Autistic social meeting, which is a big social meeting for adults who are on the autism spectrum. And this was going to be a future of me having friends and becoming friends with other people who are on the autism spectrum. And that was the 14th of August 2018. And now, the 15th of August 2018, the very next night, was actually visiting the past, going to my high school reunion. So I had reunited with my former classmates that I wish I was friends with throughout my teenage years. And that had fulfilled my wish to hang out with my other friends from school, especially outside of school hours, when I was actually mature enough, being 38 years old, to be going to the pub. So like, there was this pub called The Middle. That's where I was heading on the night when I did give out that labyrinth analogy back in episode 167. And Nathan was there too. The same Nathan that I hung out with in London, and the one that I kept on telling you about throughout the whole series of friends that I had made. So this was only after I uploaded episode 14 from Aspie with Attitude, is where I met up with my old classmates and the colleagues that I grew up in high school with. So like, I still continue my friendship with Jamie and Bron, of course, for the remainder of 2018. And by 2019, I began to discover my autistic friends and who they were, and it started off with Adam and James. It was from February 2019, after attending to a handful of autistic social meetings from the organisation called Different Journeys. It was by April or May 2019, I had found the rest of my autistic friends. There was Mitchell. What me and Mitchell had in common is that we were both interested in Lego. And then finally, there's one true friend that I had found from Different Journeys, and his name was Matt, who stands out the most. And I'm always talking to Matt and always making him laugh. That happened on one of the autistic swim nights that I did first become friends with Matt, just like I mentioned in this episode, Meet My Autistic Friend. Well, that's the person that it was. So like, at the end of 2019, I did get back in touch with Jamie and Bron, and I still continue this friendship from this day on. So like in 2020, I got my autistic friend Matt through the whole entire coronavirus pandemic, and as of today, because all my best mates who are on the autism spectrum right now is Adam, James, Matt, Mitchell and Joel, and also plus I kept a lot of my friends who are neurotypical, which happens to be Jamie and Brian, Nathan and Matt. And what these people actually have in common at the moment, those neurotypical friends of mine, is they're already raising at least one child of their own. Considering that, I think Matt and his wife has a daughter, and I know Nathan and his wife actually has 3 daughters, and Jamie and Brian actually has a son named Fox, and this is the way things are going. So my direction would probably be just the way it is anyway. So like, yeah, this is where the journey ends, and I think I better finish this episode off since this has been going on for a very long time from Aspie with Attitude. Oh yeah, that's has finally completed my whole journey, starting from 29th of December 1979 all the way up till the upload of episode 168, which is just mainly about the friends that have came and gone, whether it's school, the hip hop scene, and just other small activities as well. And one thing I haven't really mentioned is, I haven't mentioned the whole story, like I haven't talked about the friends that I've made in Scouts, and when I was involved with Scouts from, I think it was 1989 up till 1998, and also from 2001 up till 2004, I used to be involved with martial arts. So I haven't made any mention of that, which I'll eventually hope in the future to do a part 4, just to fill in the gaps, maybe in the future, depending on the success of how this series has gone. Anyway, you can always subscribe to my channel, Aspie with Attitude. And also, don't forget to ring the notification bell to keep up to date with Aspie with Attitude. And also, please like and share this video content. And also, you can even share the playlist as well, since this has been a very long video, and I hope this is just going to be a very one-off thing. So like, since it's been a very long video, that's how it all got to finish, as I just get back to normal with Aspie with Attitude. And like I said, I hope you've seen all the videos, listened to my life story as I took you through this journey. And I'd like to say, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, thanks for joining the journey through friendship, the lifetime full of friendship, peace and respect, and see you next time.